Chapter 12 of Men. Now the Valar are safe behind the mountains, and they really don't give much thought to Middle-earth now. Except for Ulmo. He can get an idea of what's going on anywhere in the world, because wherever there's water, he can basically reach that place, like up rivers and streams and in lakes, very far inland. And now that the sun is up, time is reckoned by the years of the sun. For your information, that's basically the same as our years here on Earth. When time was measured during the years of the trees, they were measured in Valian years, like Valinor, Valar, Valian. And it was a Valian year. It was much longer than a year that we would know. So one Valian year would have been about 9.5 sun years. Again, time moved slower when it was just immortals running around. But once the sun rises for the first time, men, the race of men, awaken in the far eastern land of Hildorien. And remember that they, along with the elves, are called the children of Ilúvatar. They have many different names, such as Atani, meaning the second people, and Hildor, meaning the followers. And since the first sunrise happens in the west, remember, not in the east, men are forever drawn to that direction. But there are no Undying Lands for them to go to. There's no Vala, like Orome, to guide them anywhere, and men will never really be too keen on the Valar. For one, they won't understand them, and two, they'll mostly be afraid of them. They don't really like the idea of these godlike creatures. The only Vala who seems to even care about them is Ulmo, so men are drawn to the water because they can actually hear his messages to them, even though they actually can't understand them, because men are not as in tune with the world as elves are. So they might hear messages, they don't get them. Men very soon make friends with the Avari. Remember those elves who never left Kuivienen for the great journey? Yeah, so the Avari are wandering around, and men meet them, and they learn a lot of stuff from them. At this time, when all this is happening, Morgoth is still hiding from the sun, so there's really not much danger where men wander north, south, and west. The book then mentions how the elves, the Noldor and the Sindar, and men will fight against Morgoth together a little later on, and that the curse of Feanor's oath and the kinslaying will manifest in the story's action. So it's not really a spoiler alert, it's just giving you an idea of what's coming up next. In these elder days of the youth of mankind, the race of men looks very similar to the elves. Elves and men were of like stature and strength of body, but the elves had greater wisdom and skill and beauty. The Calaquendi, the elves who had already lived in Valinor and seen the light of the two trees, they were of course more powerful and fair than the Dark Elves were compared to men. So even though Dark Elves are more powerful than men, it's not by much. The Light Elves really surpass everybody in skill and beauty and glory. It's only in Doriath that the Sindar come to almost match the Light Elves in wisdom and beauty. Why? Well, they've got Melian the Maya teaching them. So that's about as close as those guys will ever get to the light of the two trees. Elves are immortal and grow in wisdom as time goes on. They can't die of disease or illness, but they can be slain just like men. The book mentions that eventually, after a long, long time, elf souls will consume their bodies from within, kind of like fire. So they kind of just become, it's almost like they become ghosts. Now this is a really long time, keep in mind. Men, however, are mortal. In other words, they're humans. They can get sick and die, be slain, and if not, they will grow old and die instead. The elves don't know what happens to men's souls when they die. Some say they go to a special place in the halls of Mandos, separate from the elves, but only Ilúvatar, Mandos, and Manwë know where men's souls finally go, but they do not stay within the confines of Arda. and no man has ever come back from the halls of the dead except for Beren, and you will find out who he is in chapter 19, so don't worry. The last paragraph talks about how men and elves will become estranged from one another, just as Morgoth had originally intended. By the time the events in The Lord of the Rings happen, men rule Middle-earth, and the elves are just kind of a fated people who've pretty much withdrawn from the world. Unless they sail away to the Undying Lands, then any elf who stays in Middle-earth will eventually fade away into nothing, like I just mentioned a few moments ago. And remember, in these Elder Days that you're going to read about in the coming chapters, elves and men are close friends, and they're much more used to being around one another. They see each other as siblings, because they're both the children of Ilúvatar. Makes sense, right? And right at the end of this chapter, you see 3 names: Eärendil, Elwing, and Elrond. Yes, the Elrond. Even though each of these characters is part elf and part man, these 3 people have the full share in the fate of the elves, not in the fate of men. But we'll get into all those details later.